All right, welcome back again to another edition of the Contrarians. This is one of our dark horse panel situations. We are talking about Uriah Heep today, and that would mean this album here, Head First. The Head First album, as discussed in my big Uriah Heep 4-pound visual biography, available at martinpopoff.com. But we all love Heep over here. Long history with this band. They follow up. I've got my equator out as well. But essentially, the Head First album. It is definitely we're gonna talk about this as a dark horse. Abominog, people like Abominog a lot. I don't think people would call that a dark horse situation, but yeah, these shows are about shining some light on these albums we don't talk about a lot. I love doing these dark horse panels. They're always illuminating. We've done many of them now. It's probably even taken over. I would think in terms of count, we've done more of these than our original Contrarians concept way back when. But just to give a little history on Head First. So this is Heep's 15th album, May 1983. It's their final album on bronze, produced by Ashley Howe, recorded at the Manor. Abominog was Ashley Howe as well. They've got these 3 albums with Peter Goldby as the singer. Let me just see here. We've got there's your picture of the guys. We've got Lee Kerslake, Bob Daisley. Bob Daisley leaves immediately after the recording of this to go back to Aussie. We've got Mick Box there. It's probably in the Manor. It looks like the Manor. A shot of him. Maybe it's his own pool table. Who knows? We got John Sinclair and Peter Goldby. They do 3 albums with Peter Goldby of this era of the band. Kind of a shiny, commercial, accessible, keyboardy, a little bit Foreigner-esque version of the band, a little bit late Rainbow version of the band. Bronze went into liquidation right after, and this didn't get a lot of promotion. Kind of a weird album cover too as well. It's got the guillotine over here, the Head First situation. That's your Head First. And as we always do in these shows, we're just going to go around and everybody's going to give us their assessment of this thing, and we're going to do a mark, a grade out of 10, and we'll see how it pans out. I'll do it like I see it here. Let's start with Tate. Tate, what do you think of Uriah Heep Head First?
I really like it. I feel comfortable in saying that I like this. I don't like this album quite as much as I do Abominog, although I don't feel comfortable enough to say that it's Abominog light. First of all, you showed the album cover earlier. I think the album cover is terrific. This is coming from somebody who loves lizards, and the lizard species that is on the album cover, I think, is a Gila monster, which is one of the world's one of 2 venomous species of lizard. And you mentioned the guillotine in the background and kind of the desert in there and the rock formations. So as somebody who's really into nature and herpetology and everything like that, I really, and history too with the guillotine, I really like that album cover a lot. So with that out of the way, we open up the album with a really cool mid-tempo rocker called The Other Side of Midnight. Great stuff. Cool synths from John Sinclair on that. Great vocals from Peter Goldby. A really great atmospheric bridge section with a good Mick Box solo. And then we got Stay on Top, which is a really, really great Wild Cherry influenced song. Good gang vocal, great groovy bass lines from Trevor Bolder. Great song. Really, really enjoyed that a lot. This next song, I think a lot of people aren't going to like very much, although I really enjoy it, even though it's more or less a carbon copy of the original. I really like their cover of Lonely Nights by Bryan Adams. I think it's great. A great vocal from Peter Goldby on this, and a really great drumming from Lee Kerslake on it. I think because of the drumming on it by Lee Kerslake, I think it really gives it that Heep stamp. So Lonely Night, their cover of Bryan Adams' Lonely Nights, great stuff here. Sweet Talk is kind of where it starts to get a little for me, although but still good. It could have used a little bit more of Mick Box in the mix in the verses, but we got a great solo here, and the lyrics are a little cheesy. Love is Blind is another cool mid-tempo rocker, good gang vocals in the chorus, and another cool synth. Although I didn't really think that they needed to fade out in the end with that one. Roll Overture, it's okay. I didn't think it really needed to be on the album, and it kind of reminds me more of a Broadway musical. And I'm not really sure that Uriah Heep should be going in that territory. They're not the Kinks. They're not, Meatloaf. So maybe leave the Broadway stuff to Broadway and not do it on a Uriah Heep album. However, that being said, the Red Lights is a great up-tempo hard rocker. Probably one of my favorite songs on the album. And it kind of reminds me of an Abominog outtake. And in some of the harmonies, we have choices of the old 70s Byron era stuff, maybe reminiscent of Return to Fantasy, maybe even High and Mighty around that era as well. Rollin' the Rock. It kind of takes a little bit to get going. It sounds like two different songs that are stitched together between the verse and the chorus, and then Mick Box comes in with a killer solo on this one. So I really like Rollin' the Rock. And then Straight Through the Heart is a really cool song with a mysterious synth intro. Not quite as memorable, but it's a good song. But Mick Box's solo, I wish, could have lasted a little bit longer in that. And then Weekend Warriors is a pretty good way to end the album. Kind of reminds me of Too Scared to Run from Abominog. Great drumming on there from Lee Kerslake again with his great shuffle. A good bridge section, and then a good solo from Box. And then one thing, I'm not that much of a lyric guy, but I really didn't understand why the lyric about silver lightning. I read that and I'm like, I don't really understand of all of the you couldn't have done like flashy lightning or shocking light, at least if you put shocking lightning, there was a pun in there and, it could have been funny, but like silver lightning, I don't know. Maybe they just did it to sound more, sound greater and mightier. I don't know. But anyway, overall, Headfirst is a really good, accessible Uriah Heep album. It's a probably I'm kind of torn between giving it a 7.5 and 8. I think the great stuff on here is great, and I think the not so great stuff on here is still passable. So I think because of that, I'm going to give it an 8. And before I end my little monologue here, I will say that Peter Goldby did an album with Trapeze in I think it's 1979. He only did one album with the band, and called Hold On. And to me, the Uriah Heep albums with him on it are sort of like a continuation of the sound on that Trapeze album. And it's a really good Trapeze album. I mean, obviously it's no, Medusa or You Are the Music, You Are the Music, We're Just the Band. But it's still like a good kind of what you mentioned, Martin, is like a Foreigner, is a Foreigner influenced album with that arena rock stamp on it. And I think that Abominog and even this album Headfirst, and maybe to a certain extent Equator as well, are a continuation of that sound. So if you haven't checked out that Trapeze album to anyone watching, it's a good listen. It's worth listening. And then he also did a live album with Trapeze as well called Live in Texas, Dead Armadillos, and I think he kills it vocally on the Hughes stuff too. So
nice.
That is my piece on it. I give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's go to our Australian connection, Peter Kerr.
All right. Thank you. This album was my entry point for Uriah Heep, so I've got it's in a special place in my heart. It's an interesting name. Head First means that you're diving into something. Really, this album is a continuation of Abominog. I think it's a lot brighter in respect of the production. I think the songs being self-penned, it's a much more assertive album. But the star of this whole show for me has always been Pete Goldby. I love Pete Goldby's vocals. He reminds me a lot of an Australian artist that may be familiar in the Northern Hemisphere or in the UK, John Farnham. He's got that big voice, and it's just made for American-orientated rock or album-orientated rock. But I did a show on my channel called Rock Daydream Nation, and I did a show on Equator. And after doing that show, I was put in contact with Pete Goldby, and we were exchanging emails. And knowing that I was going to do this show for Head First, I thought it was, I sent him some questions because I wanted to know about the making of this album and just a few little tidbits. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share those question and answers because I think it's really important that his narrative continues, because Pete Goldby, when you look at his discography, he hasn't done a lot. And he's effectively retired from music. So my first question to him was, what was your recollection of recording Head First? Was it an easy one to do or difficult? He said, it was easy really after Abominog. We had really gelled like a family. We were confident and just got on with the job, all supporting each other. Ashley played a massive role in both albums. He found us some great songs to cover. He is a great producer. He was great for me. He found my big voice. He made me go for the big notes that I didn't know I could hit. I love him for that. Thank you, Ashley. I think we did the whole album in about 4 weeks. Drums first, then bass, then John's keyboards, then mixed guitar, then backing vocals, and then me. We were a great team. We really were. I asked him, did Heep have a particular sound in mind ahead of recording the album? Repeat the sounds of Abominog. He says, I think Ashley knew exactly the sound he was looking for. That was his job to guide us. We did the performing and he made a great sound for us. I think the sound followed on from Abominog really well. I have said many times since I could never understand why we did not use Ashley on Equator. I believe history would have been rewritten. Why change a winning formula? What are your favorite tracks off the album? So Pete really basically just talks about all the tracks. He goes, I love them all. Other Side of Midnight is fantastic. It sounded great live. It used to go down a storm. Mick would start the riff and wow, the crowd loved it. I got the idea for the title from when we toured Australia the first time. We did a late night chat show. It was called After Midnight, and the host was Donnie Sutherland. So I remember that show. Stay on Top, again, a really good song, great bass line. Lonely Nights, written by Bryan Adams. I love the singing that song live. Mick always used to look at me when I sang the line, will you risk a reputation? I don't know. He liked the way I sang that. I don't know. There was something about the way I phrased it. He would always smile at me. Sweet Talk, great song. Very clever intro on the record. I loved it. Love is Blind, a fab song. Love singing it. Roll Overture. This was John Sinclair's baby, really. A great idea to have our own intro music when we played live. Red Lights was an afterthought. Ashley said we needed a real rocker track, so we wrote the song in the studio in a few hours. It turned out really well. Rolling the Rock is actually 2 songs stuck together. It works really well. I loved singing it. Straight Through the Heart, great song, very powerful. You came on like an angel. I didn't see the evil in your eyes. You set me up. And he's written here, upset me. Weekend Warriors, very heavy, a great song to close the album. Then I asked, who in the band was the lead in the songwriting recording process, or was it a democracy? It was a democracy. Everyone worked as a team. How did the band handle Bob Daisley leaving and Trevor Bolder rejoining the band 1 month after the album release? I was gutted when Bob left, really gutted. I wish he had stayed. He and Lee were great friends and a real team. I did not know of Trevor's playing, but he fitted in perfectly straight away. Great bass playing and a good backing vocalist too. Bob Daisley says in a recent interview there was one problem. The management and record company didn't get behind the band enough. Is that your take of the situation? If so, were there any particular events you can recall that supports this? And Pete says, Bob is totally accurate in his take on things. We were let down on all sides, weak management and very little support from the record company. In hindsight, is there anything you would have changed about Head First album? I think it is a very good album indeed. I think we gave 100%. I think the vocals are splendid. I was thrilled when I first listened to it and still do love it. If Head First had been a major success, do you think the band would have taken the direction of Equator? As I said before, Ashley was a big piece of the jigsaw. I think history would have been rewritten had he had produced Equator. And then I asked a question, has he ever crossed paths with David Byron or John Lawton? And he said, no, he's never crossed paths with the previous vocalists. And does he stay in touch with the Heapsters? And he says, I still keep in touch with Mick Box and John Sinclair, their family. And there was one cheeky question I got in. I don't know if you folks are aware, but he actually auditioned for Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow for the Down to Earth. And I said, if you got the gig and sang on the Down to Earth album, what sort of album do you think it would have turned out? Would it have been like Graham Bonnet's album? And he said, great question, Peter. I don't know. So I'll just leave it like that. That's the words of Pete Goldby.
Very cool. That's awesome. Very cool. That's some great information. Yeah, I've never interviewed him. I really should try to get in touch with him and interview him at some point. But yeah, because I love those albums too. So excellent. All right, thanks, Peter. How about a grade out of 10?
I'll give it an 8.
Give it an 8. All right.
Strong 8. Yeah.
Okay. Well, over to Bill.
All right. Good morning, gentlemen. Or in Peter's case, not so much morning, but all right, this is different for me. Normally, I come on and join these discussions when I'm very familiar with an album. This is my confession time. I mean, I've come up with and discussed Heep topics here before. You know, we talked about Demons and Wizards, Magician's Birthday. I'm familiar through this whole era. Big fan of the latter day eras, the Lands-in era, the Bernie Shaw. You know, that's great stuff. This is a blind spot for me. And that's one of the reasons I signed up for this, to force myself to finally go and open my eyes to the Goldby era, which I've never listened to. I think we all have those certain artists that we have particular eras we've ignored, and this is definitely one of mine that's been waiting on me for a while. So I'm coming in this with fairly fresh ears, even though I've been an overall Heep fan for decades. The first thing that I noticed when I played through this, the first listen, it didn't sound like Uriah Heep to my ears at all. I thought I was listening to Gamma 3.5. I mean, that's great. I love Gamma. I love a lot of those bands from that era. I love that production sound, that slick, radio-friendly, hard rock, pop type stuff. That's right up my alley. So I enjoyed it while it was playing, but I got this feeling like it could have been any number of bands. Is this Gamma? Is this Rainbow? Is this Foreigner? I don't know. The second or third listen, I started hearing Mick Box in particular cut through some of the 80s production sounds, because he has a very distinctive guitar sound, obviously. So he finally started helping to give it that Heep feel, as did some of the background vocals, that classic Heep style, all the, you know the stuff, all the high harmonies and whatnot. Yeah, that I finally started getting the idea that there's Heep in here somewhere, but overall, it definitely does not sound like the classic Heep or the latter day Heep who tries to sound like the classic Heep. So I found that pretty interesting that they had this weird little section of their catalog here. I like those kind of left turns from artists where they are almost not themselves. And I really did enjoy the overall sound. When I got a little more, I found it wasn't quite as Gamma-like as I thought. I went back and listened to Gamma 3 in particular. And I think Gamma has more of a spacious sound, and Davey Pattison has a more smooth vocal sound. I like Peter Goldby's vocals quite a bit on here. This is really my intro to him, but I find his voice is a little harsher, more shrill. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It fits the music. So, and the Heep sounds a little more cluttered. It sounds like they're trying to pack a lot more in than the Gamma and other albums of that era. So, let's see here. It was cool to go back. I listened to some of the early Ozzy stuff to compare, see Kerslake and Daisley to see what they brought to that. And I looked at all the connections. I went down the rabbit hole and did one of those rock family trees and kidding Wikipedia and everything. And it was a lot of fun. I'd forgotten Daisley was on Eternal Idol later, which is one of my favorite Latter-day Sabbath albums too. So looking at all these different places where he's been, I could definitely feel his songwriting chops in there. And I found I was interested, Peter, in what you said that Peter Goldby had said about the songwriting being a democratic process. I was pretty curious about that based on the songwriting credits. One thing I found was that the originals on this album were at least as strong as the covers, if not more so. So, I'm not sure why they felt they needed the covers. Might have been a record company thing, who knows? But yeah, and I do like the Bryan Adams, Jim Vallance song. That one threw me for a loop when it first played because I was not aware that Heep had actually covered one of their songs, and I was well familiar with the Bryan Adams song from decades ago. So it was a little disconcerting, and I've always liked the song, and they did a nice version of it. Few individual song notes. Let's see here. Love is Blind in particular, I was getting a Foreigner vibe from that. I was thinking, well, maybe it's not Gamma 3.5, maybe it's Foreigner 4.5. It's hard to say. The Roll Overture, I said, where did this come from? I thought it was actually a super cool track myself. I thought it was well placed. It was a nice intermission track, and it really got my attention because it was so different from everything around it. And I like a lot of variety in my albums. I get fatigue if everything sounds too much alike. And that's why I thought it was placed very well before Red Light, which is really a kickin' rockin' track. It's relentless, and it's a perfect mood shift after. And then Rolling the Rock, I've always had a thing about plays on the terms rock and roll. I've always found it a bit cheesy, but the song itself is pretty cool, and I do like the slow build. I like the atmospheric keyboard build, and then the more rocking choruses. It's that thing that the Pixies and Nirvana and so many other artists did later. I really like the light and heavy mixture. Overall, my final thoughts on it were that it's an extremely competent album full of professionals. Said I enjoy it while it's playing, but it doesn't really stick with me after. Aside from Mick Box and some of the backing vocals, as I said, it could be any number of bands from that era. Do I like it? Yeah, I do. And it makes me want to go back and check out Abominog and Equator. Because, I've never listened to those either for whatever reason. So I do intend to add this to my overall playlist from that era, because a lot of times I like when I can just throw these songs in, they fit in with other songs, and they really put their seeds into my brain and grow into something I come to like a lot more. So we'll see what happens there long term. But I appreciate this excuse to finally go back and discover. That said, though, as much as I did enjoy it, and I do enjoy it every time I played it, I realized unlike Gamma 3 or Foreigner 4, some of these other albums of that era, I do not have the nostalgic attachment to it, which is going to affect my particular rating. So even though I like it quite a bit, I'm going to give it a 6.5.
Okay, nice. Very cool. Good overview. All right, so I'll add a few notes as well. I'll just go through the tracks a bit. Other Side of Midnight, I love Abominog is my favorite Heep album, and we did a very early Contrarians episode where I've called it that. I know it's a bit of an odd choice, but I have a very sentimental attachment to it, and I just love what they did with it. To me, The Other Side of Midnight is the only song on here that stands up to the best songs on Abominog. I think it's absolutely right up there with the best. Stay on Top. kind of interesting, Tate. I like your wild cherry nod there, but I heard a little bit of Kiss, All Hell's Breaking Loose, and Billy Squire the Stroke to this one as well. It's definitely a funk metal song. This is one of the 3 songs on here not written by the band. Abominog had 4. And I love who said this. Was it Peter? Was it Bill? This idea that the originals are as good as the covers, which is a pretty, yeah, that's a high praise. And they're well integrated because the songs, these aren't exactly, besides Lonely Nights, they aren't exactly covers. They're more like publishing house singer songwriter type songs, right? But they fit in perfectly well. That said, Lonely Nights is just way too distracting for me as a true cover. It's just, I know that song too well, and I'm not crazy about it. It's Bryan Adams, Jim Vallance, but it's got that John Mellencamp, Sammy Hagar, April Wine kind of Midwest rock vibe to it. A little bit pert, little bit new wavy, a little bit cheeky hard rock kind of thing. Sweet Talk is by them, and I really like it. I think it fits into this whole thing well. Love Is Blind is another one of the Richie Zito, right? Is another one of these singer-songwritery type songs, and it's okay. It fits in all right. I am definitely hearing the Foreigner vibe as well. By the way, the production on this album is magnificent. It's a little less gritty. It's a little less combative and dirty and aggressive than Abominog. And then Equator has its own problems. Tony Platt turns in kind of an obscure clattery, is the way I always describe it. But this is just perfect production. Everything's sitting well in the mix. Peter sounds strong. The keyboards cut through. They're very sort of dated, but still pretty cool and nostalgically cozy keyboard sounds throughout here. The funny thing is, side 2 is the one where they write the whole side. It's heavier, but I'm loving this direction so much, this Abominog direction, Blackfoot Siogo direction, Tigers of Pantang, the Cage direction to the band. I bought into this wholesale. I love this direction of the band. To me, it's a little bit Rainbow, Difficult to Cure, and Straight Between the Eyes, a little bit less bent out of shape. So that said, the 2 heavy songs on this side, Red Lights and Weekend Warriors, are actually kind of not my favorites, even though it's good to hear them rocking out. But because I bought in so much and everything else is hanging together so well, they really feel like outliers. And Peter, that was really helpful when we heard the other Peter say that this was an outlier. This was like, we need something like this on here. So it felt like there was less of a mission behind it, right? The other stuff artistically fell together properly. Roll Overture, I'm hearing Super Czar from Black Sabbath Sabotage on here with the tubular bells, the military drums, and also I'm hearing, it sounds like a cross between Super Czar and Styx. I'm hearing a lot of Styx on this album now that I didn't hear before. So yeah, Red Lights, speed metal, OTT as we used to call it back in the day. They really try hard to put in the vaulted, patented Uriah Heep vocals. Roll in the Rock is okay. It's another one of these Rainbow Joe Lynn Turner type ones. Straight Through the Heart, totally love it. Abominog pop metal kind of thing there. And like I say, Weekend Warriors. I love that. I think it was Tate. You mentioned Too Scared to Run, right? It's got the same rhythm as Too Scared to Run. It's so much like that song that you couldn't have put those 2 on the same album kind of thing, right? Then there's a bonus track, Playing for Time, which again, it's like the Queen Don't Stop Me Now beat, and it's kind of Queenish. There are some kind of like vaulted epic Queen kind of breaks and chord changes and sequences on this album that I thought were really ambitious, that I really liked. So yeah, I would give this album an 8 because I mean, it does deliver those heavy songs, and I do on one level appreciate they're there. I think the singer-songwriter songs absolutely fit this version of the band, and the rest of the originals are really good and really accessible and utilitarian. Totally happy with it. The production, Ashley's production, is gorgeous on this album as well. So yeah, I'm gonna go with an 8 here, and yeah, I don't know. Anything else to add, guys?
I don't think so.
No, other than I think it's Pete Goldby. He's the star for me.
Absolutely,
I think his vocals are just magnificent, and I think it'd be great on a future show if we could do Equator, because that's where things kind of really change.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I like how you said, he has a big voice, and it's a very distinct voice. It's a voice with personality, and it does have a little bit of that pushing air Graham Bonnet thing to it too. It's a voice that you have to use a lot of power to make it work, right? And that's
absolutely a lot of cut through. I think you said it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, there you go. I thought this was a good survey of this album. If you guys want to, listeners out there, viewers, comment below. Let us know what you think of this album. If you want to join these panels, all you got to do is be part of the Patreon situation. And then Marco has a good way of laying out and here's the topics. Everybody votes. Everybody picks what they're, what they want to talk about kind of thing. And it's turned out great. We've got a lot of great new friends here, like these guys, as part of these things. And it turns into a really cool situation with these Dark Horse panels. So there you go. Head out and listen to some Uriah Heep.